Good evening, everyone. This is Mr. Simone from Flora Park Memorial with a very brief video for you to watch on the formation of labor unions during the late 1800s in American history. So hopefully you recall that this was an era of industrialization. Some of the factors that were contributing to industrialization include the abundance of raw materials within the United States and really tremendous improvements in transportation, specifically the railroad. There were four transcontinental railroads completed by 1900. You're going to have this age of innovation and technologies and new inventions sparked by people like Thomas Edison and Alexander Graham Bell. With the growth of factories, you'll see a new source of labor, cheap labor that is, with the rise of immigration once again following the Civil War. We talked about the rise of big businessmen. There's many talented entrepreneurs who are around and emerging at this time. And the general philosophy of a laissez-faire policy, meaning that the federal government was minimally involved in regulating business, also contributed to the industrial era. But unfortunately for workers, who there was a growing middle class at this time, but workers were facing many problems within the factories. And I just listed the very basic ones: low wages, unsafe conditions, unsanitary conditions, and long hours. So, as a result of all of this, various labor unions are going to form. Now, in class, I want to have more of a discussion about the impact of labor unions. So that's why I wanted you to watch this at home. The formation of labor unions, I probably need to move my video there, but the formation of labor unions during the late 1800s includes these three major unions: the National Labor Union, the Knights of Labor, and the American Federation of Labor. And the first two, the National Labor Union and the Knights of Labor, they were largely including all workers, whether they were skilled or unskilled. But then it was the American Federation of Labor, led by Samuel Gompers, that decided to break up the unions within the skill or the craft that each worker was completing. So there are going to be a series of strikes all throughout this era. So there's going to be a lot of tension during the late 1800s between big business and unions. And I just want to end historically on these three labor strikes, I'll say, or protests. So the first one is the Haymarket Riot. Now, this was led by the Knights of Labor. They were in Chicago, and they're protesting for what I have in the other slide: better working conditions, better wages, and shorter hours. But while they're protesting, there were a group of anarchists who were in the city of Chicago. And this is still one of those mysteries in labor history. Somebody threw a grenade at the cops. It led to 7 deaths, 60 people injured, I believe, and there was tremendous tension and chaos in the city. Now, they never really identified who threw the bomb, but they did arrest several of these anarchists. And the long-term impact of this was that it was blamed on the union. Whether or not they were part of it is to be determined. But this Haymarket protest eventually, like I said, becomes known as the Haymarket Riot, and it really leads to the demise of the Knights of Labor. Now, the second one is the Homestead Strike. I only put this on here because it involves Andrew Carnegie. And I know that you've been reading about Andrew Carnegie in English class, and we learned a little bit about his background. But this is really like a blemish on his record because it was another violent episode. There were workers who were on strike. Carnegie wasn't in the country at the time. Some people think if he was, this wouldn't have happened. And then there were scab workers. There were workers who were replacing those who were on strike. And then there were security guards known as Pinkertons. But basically, just know that this is something that Carnegie was not proud of. Now, the one I really want you all to remember, and this is the last one for this video, is the Pullman strike. Follow along carefully, all right? The railroads were a major part of the industrial era. Now, 1 year before this, there was an economic panic, 1893. Now, when the economy goes down, just like it is today, people's rents also go down. So right now, you can look around New York City, and the rent prices are down, I think, $600, $700, $800, $900 a month. This man, George Pullman, he was the owner of a railroad company, but he also built a little town for his workers to live in. I think he called it Pullman Town. So he's charging them rent, and they are working for him. So naturally, when the panic hits, they expect their rent to go down. He doesn't. Okay, he keeps their rent the same and lowers their wages. So as a result of that, this guy who we're going to talk about in class, Eugene V. Debs, he leads this strike, and they shut down about 60 or 70% of the railroad traffic. So here's the part I want you all to remember. The President of the United States, Grover Cleveland, not a name many people are probably familiar with, Grover Cleveland ended this strike. And he did so because he made the argument that they were interfering with the transit of the mail. And whether you know this or not, or whether you believe this or not, that is a federal offense. So because it's the United States Post Office. So that was his argument. Now, historically, we look at this and say, he was on the side of big business. The workers got nothing out of this. So it shows that during the late 1800s, during the Gilded Age, the federal government was really siding more with big business as opposed to the workers. So that's it. I hope that I made it clear for everyone. I hope I kept it at that 5-minute mark. Labor union part should be easy. The Pullman strike might be a little bit confusing for some people, and then we'll get to have a nice little discussion in class with a little bit of an activity. Take care, and I will see you tomorrow.